The New York Rangers season is now only a couple games away from being completely over, as they are now officially eliminated from playoff contention, which it is disappointing. I was kind of expecting this for the past kind of few weeks now with the way they've been playing as of late. Down the stretch here, in games that have kind of mattered most here, with games on the line there, with the playoffs, still in reach at moments, there was obviously hope that this team could kind of make the playoffs here, but unfortunately, when things truly mattered most, there when they needed to come out with these wins, they, for the most part, there came out with pretty poor effort to start the game, low energy, and just didn't really come to play there as they continued to kind of pile up the losses there as of late, and that is truly why this team is not in a wild card spot now. Of course, there were some pretty high expectations for this team coming into this season here, and with where they're at, I think it's been a pretty disappointing overall season, but there is still some positives to come from this season here. Obviously not many, but I think, we saw a guy like Will Cooley kind of take some big steps in his game there. Obviously, I think that was quite nice to see, and he's an RFA, so we'll see what happens with his new contract, but I'd imagine he gets a new deal and is definitely going to be back with the team next season, so there's, a positive, obviously not a ton of positives, but I think there's a few for sure, and when you really take a look at things with this Rangers team, I think there are some good building blocks to kind of build around this team kind of going forward. You got guys like, Adam Fox, an Igor Shesterkin, obviously may not have had the best overall season, but I still think he is a, true number one kind of goalie, obviously one of the better goalies in the entire NHL, and come playoff time, I still imagine is going to be that elite kind of guy. So I think when you have a goalie like that, you have a number one defenseman like Adam Fox there, yes, you got to get some more pieces on the back end there. I think at least one more true top four caliber defenseman is needed there, but Borgen and Schneider are also some solid kind of building blocks there. Same thing with Susie. If he's in the bottom pairing kind of role next season there, might not be the worst thing in the world, especially if we do get a new defensive system in as well. And that's also a thing there. If we do get a new defensive system in, that could also help kind of and really help a lot of these kind of defensive issues there, and maybe make a guy like Carson Soucy, who hasn't looked great so far since joining the Rangers, maybe look a little better as well. That's definitely a possibility. So I think getting a new coach in there definitely could help out the kind of defense side of things there. But on the forward side of things, you've also got some good building blocks like Will Cooley. Obviously, Lafreniere hasn't been great, but he's still a decent building block there. You've got Trocheck. You still got Panarin for at least another season there. All these some other pieces as well, like a JT Miller. You've got a lot of young guys coming up now, like a Berard, a Perreault, obviously an Othman. So I think there's a lot of talent on this team there. We're going to kind of wait and see what happens and truly which pieces stay on this team. And, maybe a guy like Berard gets traded away this offseason or an Othman. It's definitely a possibility there. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen. But the important part is there are some, solid young pieces on this NHL roster right now who are ready to compete, which is quite nice there. The Rangers have quite a few different wingers that, can pretty much be playing next season with a cap of less than $1 million, on their entry level contract. So that's quite nice there. And also the bottom six kind of side of things there for the forwards, I think, there is some pretty solid depth there with guys like Jonathan Brodzinski, Sam Carrick, Matt Rempe, Adam Edstrom there. The fourth line is definitely pretty much set there for next season there. This team has a lot of nice kind of bottom six pieces there. So I think there is a good kind of foundation to this team for the most part there. If you get in a good new coach there, possibly with a better system, as well as getting some better assistant coaches there, possibly better guys than, Phil Howes, who obviously hasn't done a good job at all with the defensive unit, I think this team can really kind of quickly kind of get back on track here towards their winning ways. Now, I don't know if they're going to make themselves a absolute kind of elite, top 3, top 2 kind of real Stanley Cup contender for next season, but with the pieces that this team does have there, if they make the right moves in this offseason, I definitely think there is a chance that we can see this team really get back on track and really get into their winning ways and possibly go on a big run next season there, especially when you do have a guy like Igor Shesterkin in that there. You do have a number one defenseman in Adam Fox, and you also do have some star forwards on that side of things. So like I said, I think there's some good building blocks here with this team. Obviously, it's not a perfect roster, and that's kind of why I think we need to see some pretty major moves happen this offseason. But having all of these young guys on the forward side of things there, having some solid pieces already locked in the back end there, even a guy like Urho Vakanainen in there, if he is your seventh defenseman going into next season there, I think that's all right. So there is some solid depth on this team there, but now it's about adding in some more kind of overall talent, I would say. I think we need to add in, like I said, a true top 4 caliber defenseman or a top pairing kind of guy. This team also needs to go out there and definitely add in a third line center. Those are the two musts, I would say, is adding in a pretty big upgrade there on the defensive side of things. There are top 4 defensemen, a true one, as well as a third line center. I think those are the two moves that are absolute must. You have to make those things happen there. I think on the center side of things there, Jordan Brodzinski, when he is that third line center, it's okay, but I like him more in a kind of a depth role, whether he's maybe a winger on that third line or a winger on that fourth line there, being the kind of fifth centerman in the lineup there. I like to see him in that kind of a role. Then if injuries do happen, then you can see that guy like Jordan Brodzinski kind of take that step into that third line center role when injuries do happen. But if injuries aren't happening and even Mika's healthy there, obviously I would like to see a new kind of center added in there. I want to see Mika stay on that wing there, obviously, which he's done a much better job at. Brodzinski as the kind of fifth center is not a bad idea at all, especially with Sam Carrick as the 4C. So if you add in a good 3C there, I think that provides a lot better center depth for this team, especially when you have guys like Noah Laba who are going to be coming up over the next few seasons as well, potentially kind of maybe getting a chance at the NHL level next season at points maybe. So we'll have to wait and see there, but the Rangers are going to have some centermen kind of coming up through the system over the next couple of seasons there, which is going to be very nice to see. And since the Rangers did trade away their 2025 first-round pick that is top 13 protected in this upcoming draft, it definitely makes things a little interesting because the Rangers do have the choice. If this pick does fall within that top 13, the Rangers have the option to either keep it or give it to Pittsburgh, obviously because Vancouver ended up flipping that first-round pick and the Rangers gave to them for JT Miller. They flipped that pick right over to the Pittsburgh Penguins as they got back a couple players there in Drew O'Connor and Marcus Pettersson, two guys who they extended. But basically that first round pick now that went to Vancouver is now going to be going to Pittsburgh. So the Rangers have the option, if that pick is in that top 13 there, that ends up falling there after the draft lottery, the Rangers have the option to either keep that pick or give it away in this year's draft. So if it does fall within, let's say, pick 11, 12, 13, maybe the Rangers do decide to go, hey, well, let's give up this year's first round pick in a not overall great draft there. It seems to be a draft where it has kind of, 4, 5, or 6 guys at the top there that seem to be all really good, kind of somewhat even prospects there, kind of elite prospects, you could say. But after that, it definitely seems to kind of fall off there. So maybe in this draft, whereas next year's draft is looking like a really deep kind of elite one, maybe next year's draft, you would rather kind of, have pick, let's say, even 20 compared to pick like 12 or 11 in this year's draft possibly, right? That's a possibility. So maybe this team does opt to give up their pick in this year's draft, where it's maybe not as good of a draft as next year. And with where this team sits in the standings currently, they are guaranteed to finish in that top 13. So no matter what, the Rangers are going to have to make the decision there of keeping or giving away that pick. So they're going to finish no matter what, more than likely in that kind of 10, 11, kind of 12 range. Probably something around there kind of seems the most likely. So assuming they do finish around there, that is kind of the mark where I still think there is the kind of, question on whether or not you want to keep that pick or, I'll just keep next year's pick. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And, what they want to do on the trade side of things as well definitely could play a bit of an impact on what their decision is with this pick here, because maybe a team they're trading with values, next year's unprotected pick a lot more than pick, let's say, like 11 or 12 in this year's draft, right? So there's obviously that kind of possibility there. And you do assume the Rangers are going to probably be better next season than this one. They're probably going to make the playoffs. So I would imagine this pick is definitely going to be, worse, kind of just looking at it on paper-wise. It's going to be obviously more than likely a later pick than like 11, 12, or 13, whatever it is, like 10, 11, 12. But my point is, maybe that pick that, a team kind of projects to be, around that kind of, 15, 16, 18, kind of low 20s mark, maybe that pick somehow is more valuable to a team if they kind of project next year's draft to be that much better. That could be a more valuable pick. So this team has a lot of kind of decisions to make there, whether or not teams themselves or other teams out there kind of value next year's pick more than this year's pick that is going to be around that 10, 11, 12 mark. We don't exactly know, but we're going to have to wait and see, obviously. And it's going to be interesting to kind of see what does happen there, because this first round pick, it definitely holds a lot of cards here, because it affects what this team can do in this year and next year's draft, as well as what this team can do trade-wise, in this offseason and in next one as well, partially, and in next season as well, mid-season. So giving up that first round pick definitely hinders the ability to go out there and make more moves, but obviously it was used in a deal to pick up a very good kind of star caliber, number one kind of centerman, I would say, in JT Miller. So I think that was a good trade there, but obviously giving up that pick, you're now in an interesting spot there with the decision to kind of make. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen here. But anyways, I do want to thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. Don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video as well. Do you want to see this team kind of keep that first round pick in this year's draft? You want to keep it for next year's draft? Let me know your thoughts. And also, what kind of moves do you want to see made after this team is obviously officially now eliminated from the playoffs? I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.